Sanjeev says, if India can't opt for a one-child policy like China, what can be some alternatives to control such a drastic blast of population? Subscribe and learn something new every day on Ask Abhijit Clips. So there's an interesting question. So India's population has now surpassed that of China. India's population is 1.4 billion or 140 crores, like we say in Sanskrit or Hindi. 140 crores. Ideally, we have to ask ourselves, what is the ideal size of the population of the Indian subcontinent? We're talking about the Indian subcontinent here, which includes Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, all of that. Let's talk about all of that. Maldives. What's the ideal size of the Indian subcontinent's population? Well, around the beginning of the 20th century, let's say around 1930, 1940, what was the population? It was about 330 million, 33 crores, right? Today it is 140 crores. I think ideally the population of India, the Indian subcontinent, should be between 300 to 350 million. And we are way past that. So obviously when you have like roughly four times the population, when you have roughly four times the ideal population, there's going to be a huge burden on the resources of the subcontinent, on the soil, on the natural resources. So you will have four times the ideal amount of people competing for the same resources. It's going to place a huge burden on the systems, on the infrastructure, and on the resources. It's going to cause deforestation. It's going to cause the soil quality to deteriorate. It's going to cause extinction of species. Unfortunately, it has all these terrible effects. So ideally, you want the population of India to gradually, slowly, sustainably shrink over an extended period of time to around 350 million or so. That I would say should happen over the next 2 or 3 centuries, not over the next 50 years, which would be a total disaster. Why will it be a disaster? Because when you shut down the birth rate, total fertility rate for a sustained population of the same population is 2.1 children per woman. That's the TFR, total fertility rate, for sustaining the population at the current level. If you want the population to start dropping, the TFR should be below 2.1. Right now, India's TFR is 2.0. So we are already below sustainable population. So India's population will slowly decline. China's TFR is around 1.1, which is a catastrophe. When your population starts declining and the birth rate decreases, you know what happens? The average age of the population starts rising. And soon China's population by 2050 is going to be, the average age will be 57 or 58. When your average human being is 58 years old, what vitality will your nation have? Ask yourselves this. If you opt for a one-child policy in 30, 40, 50 years, that's a situation where you're going to encounter. There's almost no coming back from that. Even if China forces its population to have a 3-child policy, it is still not going to make much of an impact now for the next 100 years or so. That's the conundrum they've put themselves in. So the alternative for India, I agree that the population needs to come down. The ideal population should be between 300 to 350 million, which is almost 1/4 of where we are today. 1/4, yeah, 1/4. To come down to that level, you have to do it in a very gradual, slow, steady, calibrated, and intelligent manner. Otherwise, your average age is going to rise and you're going to have a nation of old people, and such a nation can't survive for the long term. So ideally, I would say this should happen over the next 2 centuries, at least a century. Even a century is too much, is too little. I would say it should be over the next 2 centuries. By 2200, ideally, India's population should be around 350 or 400 million, or maybe 300 million. Even that may be a little too drastic, perhaps. Maybe 3 centuries. So there is no short-term solution to this. Short-term solutions are never good. So that's the alternative I can think of. It has to be done in a very intelligent, calibrated, and very gradual manner. Ideally, the average age of your population should be below 40. So by 2050, India's average age is going to be about 37 or 38. Ideally, you want it to be in the early 30s or even late 20s. That's a strong, vital, young population. That's how you want to be. You don't want everyone to be old. That's what I would say should happen. A one-child policy is terrible. Maybe a 2-child policy for a start. Maybe a two-child policy. And I'm sure there'll be lots of protests if you do that. But, well, okay.